You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rosanes. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is a communications trainer and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share it with friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation.
Alper, today we have a guest on the podcast,
Yes.
Rick Pizzoli. Rick is from my home state, so he's a Californian, but these days he lives in Madrid, and in fact, he has been in Madrid for quite a while. If I'm not mistaken, he's lived in Madrid for about the same amount of time that I've lived in Turkey. So, Alper, you and I have something in common with Rick, which is that all three of us live in countries that are not our home countries. So anyway, hi, Rick, and welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Welcome.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Albert. Really appreciate you having me on the show.
For over 20 years, Rick has run a company called Salesforce Europe. His company, Salesforce Europe, helps tech companies expand their sales into Europe. And these days, at least, tech companies usually means a lot of SaaS, or in other words, software as a service. Not necessarily 100% SaaS, but a lot of it. Rick also does a lot of startup mentoring and advising in Switzerland, the UK, Italy, Portugal, and God knows where else. Basically, if it's a place, Rick is there. And by the way, when I first ran across Rick, I read some of the ebooks he has published on his company's website. They're really interesting and they're very rich in thought and information. So I highly recommend checking them out. Just go to his website, salesforce.com. Or
Salesforce.com.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Salesforceeurope.com.
Such an easy
them there.
Yeah.
And, okay, so that brings me to the next point, which is before we bring Rick in to finish off this intro, let me clear up one thing, and that is that his company, Salesforce Europe, has a very similar name to the software company, Salesforce, but I want to stress that the similar names are just a coincidence. And we're not talking today to someone from Mark Benioff's company. So, back off, people. Give this man some space. Okay, so that said, let me turn it over to Rick to finish off the intro. And in particular, I'm wondering something, Rick. You're from San Francisco, and you went to San Diego State University. So you're knee-deep in California. But here you are today living in Spain, and not just for a short time, for years and years. So tell us a little bit about how that happened. And by the way, don't forget to tell our listeners if they want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Great. Well, thank you, Matt. Really appreciate the intro. That was great. Yes, I'm originally from San Francisco. I was born in LA. I grew up in San Francisco, went to school in San Diego. So I covered the state. My father was in tech, so I grew up around the tech space. I went to San Diego State to study technology and worked in tech in San Francisco for 5 years. But I always loved Europe. I had spent a year in Italy during university and in the summer in Switzerland. So after 5 years of technology sales, mainly in San Francisco, I was kind of keeping my eye on Europe and what was out there. I got a job offer at Nortel Networks at the time to launch Europe for a new division of Nortel. They kind of wanted American sales and marketing flavor to the division. So I did that 3 years in London and then moved to Madrid just for greener pastures in 2000. And then I left Nortel to launch Europe for another technology company, a fiber optics company, and then left there to launch Europe for a Spanish software company, and learned a lot about that kind of market and trade process, about hiring people, firing people, opening up offices, building lead gen teams, building sales teams, really building go-to-market strategies, doing it right, doing it wrong. And there's a lot of tricks to the trade. And so in 2003, I founded Salesforce Europe to really provide those services that I needed as that GM of Europe. And since then, we've helped about 500 tech companies expand in Europe via a team of about 100 people. So that's kind of what led me to Europe and what kept me in Europe. So I've been in Spain now for almost 25 years and 21 years managing Salesforce Europe.
Okay. And so thanks, Rick. And let's dive into the subject for today. Let's start out with something on the basic end of things. So tell me, Rick, let's say that, for example, I am a Turkish SaaS startup and I've been selling into my home country, Turkey, for a while. So I've got revenue, I've got staff, I've got a client roster of nice solid names that any average Joe out on the street in Turkey would probably recognize. But I decide that we need to expand our sales into the EU. So tell me, what are some of the things that might be prompting me to say that we need to do this?
So we work with some really interesting Turkish companies. There's a great startup community, and when companies come to us, the first thing we ask them is, tell us about your business in Turkey. Tell us about who you're selling to today, and who's your ideal customer profile. And people will say, well, we sell to lots of people. Well, that's fine. I mean, it's normal. A startup comes, they test lots of markets, they might win different types of deals, but as they grow, they will find that there's a better product market fit in certain verticals than other verticals. And so as they grow, there's a maturity that has to happen of a company, of not to chase everything that moves, but really focus on that sweet spot, that product market fit. Because then when you go to Europe, you need to identify what that product market fit is and what that sweet spot, and build your strategy around that. And you can't do that until you realize as a company who you are. So define what that sweet spot company is in Turkey first, and then do a bit of an analysis on your home team structure. How are you getting those deals? Are you doing digital marketing? Are you doing lead generation? How are you doing the sales? What's that team structure? What are the KPIs? How many leads is your lead gen team producing? And how are they moving from leads to opportunities to close deals? And do a bit of a plan on who you are. And that could just be a few pages, but it's a really important exercise to go through. And then once you know, then map that across Europe. So if you're targeting tier 2 telcos, then let's take a look at Europe and see where tier 2 telcos exist. Because if you decide we want to launch in France, we have some French speakers, you go there, you spend a year worth of selling, and you find out, wow, there actually aren't any tier 2 telcos left in France, because as soon as they get above 50,000 users, the big ones buy them. So it's really important to analyze who you are, who your target customers are, where your competition is, because you find out that our sweet spot is retail. We want to go to the UK because we know the UK retail space is really hot. But you analyze, you were like, wow, our 3 biggest competitors, one is born in the UK, one is born in France and it's already in the UK, one's from the US and is already in the UK. So you're number 4, you're going to struggle. So understand who you are, who your target customers are, where your competition is, map that across Europe, and then define, okay, which countries do we want to jump into now?
And how do I know when this time has come for me, or this time has come for my company? How do I know when it's time to branch out? Is it when I feel like we've nailed the product market fit in our home country? Is it when we've staffed up our marketing department enough to do customer surveys in the new market? What is it? How do I know when this time has come?
You don't want to go too early, and you don't want to go too late.
Yeah.
You need, we say you should have at least $1 million in revenue in your home market, preferably 2 to 3, at least $500,000 in budget for opening up a new market. So you need traction in your home market. You need budget for the new market. You need capacity within the management team and the operations team and the finance team and the sales team in your home market to support a new market. So whether you hire somebody or you work with a third party like us, there's still management time to support those teams. And those teams aren't going to work in just magic. So you need to have happy customers in your home market, referenceable customers in your home market, enough margin or investment to expand in a new market, enough time to do that planning that I talked about, and enough time in the day of your existing team to support that new market. Because sometimes we have clients and they're so busy, they don't have time to support us, or they don't have time to do the adjustments of the marketing tools or the sales strategy or the product to really be successful in a new market. Because the product market fit in Turkey will always be different in Germany and different again in the UK, and maybe different in different verticals. And so you need capacity in these different teams to be able to make those subtle adjustments to get that fit right.
Okay. And let's talk about how this process is going to change the organizational structure, or my organizational structure back home. Can I lead into these new markets with the same people? are my sales stars back home? Are they going to be the sales stars in the new country? What do you say to that?
It, they could be, depending on, let's say, the price point in your sales strategy, right? So some companies, to build business, they are going to be doing more of a digital marketing approach. Let's say their pricing is between maybe 1,000 to 20,000 annual recurring revenue, and that's too low of a ACV, average contract value, to sell. Right? People need to self-service. So you
Okay.
need to have a digital marketing strategy to get your product and your brand out there, and then probably a product-led growth strategy so people can start playing with it, testing it, trying it, maybe a freemium model, or they can play with it for a month and then they need to pay with a credit card. And a lot of that work can be done from your home market because it's more digital, it's more product-led growth, it's more of a support team. There's great English speakers in Turkey or in Spain or France or Germany or the US. And so if you have that strategy at a lower end, you can do a lot of that from your home market. But if you start moving into an ACV of 20,000 to 100,000, then you're going to need a lead generation team and an inside sales team of, in this case, of Europeans. So French, native Europeans, they could be living in Turkey, or they could be based in country, or they could be in some European hub. But at this new level of kind of mid-market, it's very competitive. And so if you're selling into France with an English speaker, you're going to struggle competing against the other French companies. And so people are really going to be looking to do business in their home language. Now, that's mainly
Okay.
France, Spain, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Nordics
Sure.
are a bit more flexible. But again, there's
Uh-huh.
always competition. And the more time you have local people, then the lower the risk and the better, easier it is for local teams to qualify and close opportunities versus against the competition.
Okay. And so one thing that you mentioned on your website or in one of your ebooks, I can't remember. One of the things that you mentioned is that the people involved should plan on spending about 1 day a week on this international expansion. So let's say that I'm a SaaS startup. So I have, my employees, they're stressed out, they're overworked, and now here I am telling them, okay, in order to expand internationally, I need you to take 20% of your time and dedicate it to this project that may not pay off for another year. How do I go about that? That's a pretty hard message to give to my people.
In most cases, you don't have an option.
Uh,
In the US, it's a big market. The GDP for tech spend in the US is about the same in Europe.
mhm.
And so you can do a Series A, you can do a Series B, you can grow pretty large. If the US companies don't go to Europe soon enough, there's going to be a European copycat
Okay.
that's going to grow quickly, or maybe multiple ones. So when you do come, it's going to be hard. But European markets are smaller.
Okay.
Talking about Turkey, it's the market is only so big, and so at some point you're gonna run out of target clients to call on, and
Mhm.
so your options are expand or broaden my suite of services. Now you can broaden your suite of services and keep selling to more people in Turkey, and many companies do that. So they got a very broad range. But the broader you go in your home market, then the harder it's going to be in the future to expand, because somebody does lots of different things. It's hard to build their brand coming into a new market. So it's two strategies. One, either you go broad and stay in your home market, or you stay very laser focused on doing one thing extremely well. So when you go into a new market, you say, we are the best SaaS for retail or for manufacturing or for automotive. And then we build a specialized team around that. And it's just like the point of an arrow. We target those markets, we get our lead customers, and we expand from there. So to answer your question, European companies, they really don't have a choice. They need to go earlier. It does take a year. So you need to have that year investment. It does take time for people on the team. And it's just part of the normal evolution of any startup, scale up in Europe, that they need to find time and capacity for that growth.
And I have one more question, and then I'm going to throw it over to you, Alper. Is that cool if I
Go ahead. Yeah.
continue with the question? Okay. So, Rick, it sounds like what you're talking about. So, not only am I, for something like this, not only am I going to need the support of my employees, I'm also going to need the support of my investors. Would you agree with that?
Investors, if you have
Uh-huh.
investors,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Uh-huh.
most investors are very keen because if it's a VC investor, they want exits in a few years, and they're not going to get an exit in a few years if you stay in your home. So they want quick growth, and they want money well spent. So
Okay.
they don't want you to hire a general manager of France who's going to then, it takes 6 months to hire him, and then he's going to build his own team before he starts engaging the market, and that could be another 6. They want revenue and they want results. So they want you to hire salespeople, lead gen people, or a third party team that's going to hit the ground and drive revenue and qualify that market in or qualify that market out quickly. It's okay to make mistakes, and some markets might not be a fit. You need to give the market time, analyze the data, and you can analyze data from day one. Once you start calling and emailing and LinkedIn, what are the rates? What are the open rates? Are people answering? Are they responding? Are you getting marketing qualified leads? What are the conversion rates from marketing qualified leads to sales qualified leads? So from analyzing the data, you will know early on if people are interested in your service in that market or not. But you need to have the data and compare it to something, preferably data in your home market, to know if those new markets are working or not.
So if I am pitching this idea of an international sales expansion, if I'm pitching this idea to my investors, I'm probably assuming that I have investors. I'm probably going to have a fairly interested listener base, audience, probably going to have a fairly interested audience, but I'm going to need to show them that I've done some work. I'm not just saying, "Hey, everybody, happy day. We're gonna, sell in France now, or we're gonna sell in the EU." I need to show them, some market research, and I need to show them that I've done my homework and who the competitors are and what are the best countries to target and why we've chosen that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And if you don't have that skill set
Uh,
on the business side
okay.
or on the market side, then contract somebody to do that for you. There's
Okay.
lots of smart people that have done this many times that specialize in that.
Okay.
So if you don't have the skill set in-house, because typically people who don't do this for a living are, normal CEOs or VP of sales, maybe have done this 2 or 3 times in their life, but there are people that do this every week, every month, these go-to-market planning. And so our advice is bring somebody in, bring a specialist in to help you do that. So you have it's kind of like building your investors. If you haven't done it before, if you're not expert, bring somebody in, build that investors deck.
Okay.
And they need to have real numbers, and that needs to include some real numbers on market growth. Investors will see through in a second. They say, "Oh yeah, we're going to launch in France, and here's the hockey stick growth we're going to do." And they're going to say, "Well, how are you going to do that?" "Well, we're just our team's going to call it France." Yeah, in what language, right? And that growth is too fast. We don't believe it. So they will see through those growth numbers really fast if you don't really have a good story behind them.
What would you say if I'm standing there in front of my investors and I've got a PowerPoint up on the screen and I'm trying to pitch to them this idea that we need to expand abroad. So in addition to showing the sales growth numbers that you just mentioned, what are a couple of other things that I should make sure are in that pitch presentation?
Where the competition is, and how well they've done in these markets. How are they structured? Where do they have people? Who your target customers are in those new countries? Are they using similar products today or not? What your sales strategy is. So are you doing digital marketing into those markets? Are you doing lead generation? Are you doing sales? What the budget you have for those markets are. What the KPIs are. So if you're doing digital marketing, have you started yet? Are you getting inbound yet? Are you doing any lead generation into those markets yet? Are you seeing any results? Do you have any key customers today, reference clients in those new markets yet? And how are you going to get them? Maybe you need to kind of buy those first customers or, highly discount those first early customers. All that needs to be well thought out. And you need to show your investors that it's a solid plan and not just a wish list.
Okay. And Alper, I've been kind of hogging all the questions here. So let me throw the floor over to you. What's on your mind?
Thank you. Rick, we talked several moments ago about the importance of having local boots on the ground, especially speaking the local language. And before coming here today, I was doing some research on you, and I came across a video of yours where you were talking about outsourced sales teams. And I find that topic pretty interesting. And I would like to ask you, for example, what do you think are some of the key differences between managing an outsourced sales team versus an in-house? And when you say outsourced, I'm assuming that they are not on the company payroll, but they are acquired services from independent contractors or other companies, right?
Yes. So this concept of having an agent goes back to medieval times, right? And
Yeah.
industries like pharmaceuticals and furniture and others have been doing it forever. It's fairly new in technology. I mean, technology has always been outsourcing digital marketing because they're big, multi-talented teams. Lead generation, it's a mix, but a lot of companies have it in-house and also work with out-house. So even the biggest companies, Oracle, Intel, Salesforce, they all have in-house lead gen teams, and they work with third parties for events, for specific projects. So it's normal. And then sales has traditionally more been in, but moving slowly out because people realize I need people in new countries, and it is hard to hire. I might not have entities in those countries, so how do I hire them? And then with COVID, this whole mixed blended team kind of blew that all open and said, wow, people could be working in the office. They could be working remotely. They could be working as an employee. They could be working as through employment of record company like globalization partners. So technically, globalization partners does the contract, but they're full-time for company, right?
Yeah.
Or they go through a third-party sales agency. We provide full-time, fully dedicated, outsourced people. It could be half-time, but so they work exactly like an employee in a new market. The only difference is we source them, and typically we know them. We provide some sales strategy up front, working with the client to understand which markets, which verticals, and making sure that those hires fit the verticals that you're targeting to. We report into the sales structure of the client, but we typically have an extra layer of sales management at the European level and at the local level. So if we're providing a full-time salesperson in Italy, we also have a country manager in Italy who can keep an eye on the person, help with contacts, opening up new doors. So it's just another level of support that we provide as a outsourced team versus an employee. The costs are virtually the same. So we're not a cheap, low-cost solution, but it's about the same by the time you hire and you pay all the business cost of hiring and keeping somebody on. We provide, we believe, an extra layer of kind of hand-holding. And then if any clients want to convert our team from full-time contract to full-time employees, they can. They pay us a recruitment fee, and we move them over.
I see. Do I understand correctly that, for example, you have a country manager who may be responsible for different industries within the same country for different clients?
That's correct. So
Okay.
the sales specialists are hired for a specific industry. So they're going to be specialists in retail or telco or manufacturing. And then typically we have a country manager who's more of a generalist. So he may or may not have all those contacts, but he's going to know the industry. We're going to try to cross-sell the best we can. He's going to know the different clients that we have selling into that industry. So there's a lot of, again, cross-selling opportunities that we have.
Yeah.
And there's also networking. Like we are in Milan this week working with UniCredit and the startups that come through UniCredit. And because we do that kind of pro bono with UniCredit, that's an open door to help with contacts within their ecosystem.
Would you say there are specific industries that are better suited for this scenario of outsourcing sales?
I came from the telco world, and I left Nortel to launch it for a big fiber optic company. So they needed people in France, in Germany, in the UK to sell this big box. So we poached people from Cisco, Marconi, and Ericsson, selling one big box into the big telcos. They came from businesses that were selling hundreds of different products. So after we got them into the one box in these big telcos, like, what are they going to do next? Well, have your guy in France sell in Italy, but he doesn't speak Italian. And he doesn't know that. So it's like, how do we leverage these people's knowledge to other complementary, non-competitive solutions? So it really kind of started in the telco space, but it also applied to retail because there might only be, let's say, 10 big retailers in the space. So we do a lot of consumer electronics. into the big retailers and big distributors. It could work in banking and insurance because it might only be, 10 big banks and insurance companies in a particular market. So it works really well when you need specialized people in the local markets.
Mhm.
It works quite well when you need, let's say, a centralized but European lead gen or inside sales team, where we can put a hub of Europeans, all the European data and the tech stack and everything to address a target market set of thousands of potential companies. So
Mhm.
it's either in country targeting a smaller set or more of an inside sales or lead generation using data to target a bigger set.
Mhm. And Matt, I have one more question.
Sure.
Rick, do I understand correctly that you're mostly focusing on developing businesses in Europe, businesses of companies outside of Europe who want to sell more in Europe, enter or sell in Europe, right?
We're even now between US to Europe and Europe to Europe.
Okay.
So a Turkish scale up or a Spanish or a UK scale up has the exact same needs. So we are, for example, the main sales mentor for London and Partners, which is part of the mayor's office in London for their export group. So we're helping London-based companies do their strategy to sell in Europe. So it's the same need. Sometimes European companies know earlier than their American companies that to sell in European countries, you need Europeans.
Yeah.
You just can't put an office in London or in Amsterdam and take over Europe from there. You
Yeah.
really need either local people, if it's, let's say, enterprise sales, or at least Europeans in Europe, if it's mid-market.
And did you ever find yourself in the position to explain, for example, we have stricter privacy rules here, especially with the GDPR. Did you ever find yourself in a position trying to explain that to people who are not familiar with it, and how, as I believe, it can sometimes be like a block in front of you in terms of reaching mass amounts of people?
Understanding GDPR is critical. So you could hire, there's a lot of these new AI generated calling companies, emailing companies, LinkedIn companies that just say, oh, don't worry about it. We'll read it, we'll create it, we'll blast these out. They're not GDPR compliant. It's creating a mass amount of noise in the market. It's harder for the rest of us to sell. And those companies don't get fined, right? The parent company gets the fines, and these fines are hard. So it is getting harder and harder with GDPR, but it's protecting all of us from spam in theory. And it's getting harder with all the AI generated stuff out there. So we use AI to help us define the target markets, and all the tools we use have an element of AI today. But at the end of the day, it's always people to people, building real relationships and qualifying opportunities in moving projects forward. So I think understanding the whole GDPR structure and other regulation and knowing how to work around it is key. And so you either need somebody in Europe, if they're building their own team, who understands that, or a third party. I mean, we sell GDPR and other compliance tools. So not only are we compliant ourselves, but we're promoting these types of tools in market.
I'm not 100% knowledgeable, so I would like to ask if you are, for example, in Europe, can I randomly call a person in any company and ask about their, for example, design needs? Let's say I found this person through LinkedIn. We're not connected. He doesn't know me. I don't know him, but somehow I got a hold of his number at the office. And can I just call him up?
I mean, you can absolutely call an office. A business can call another business. It's not a problem. In particular, if you're offering a real service to a real company, you're not spamming. So you can absolutely do that. In theory, you're not supposed to call mobile numbers because typically mobiles are private. They're a personal number. So if you're receiving a call, a telemarketing call from your number on your mobile number, you can tell them, this is a private number. You're breaking GDPR rules. Please take me off your list.
I receive at least 10 of them every day.
Yeah. Or just block it. But yeah. So in theory, and the same thing with email. So you're not supposed to email blast, but if you have a specific need to a specific target, it's a bit gray area if you want to be really strict. But we have large clients that come to us and say, we have existing database of thousands of customers and people interested in our products, but we don't have them opted in. Specifically opted in. Can you go through and contact all of our clients and get a request to opt them in? And these are people that have been receiving, for example, Microsoft, Salesforce, Intel, Oracle communications for years, but now they're having to go back through their own databases and clean them
Yes.
up and make sure they're compliant.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So, Alper, I've got one more question before
Sure.
we need to wrap up for the day.
Sure.
Is it okay if I jump
Yeah.
in? So, Rick, this question is coming to us from one of our listeners, and I know a lot of people who write LinkedIn posts or go to conferences and trade fairs, stuff like that. And their hope is that they're going to attract attention from abroad. Personally, I wonder sometimes, well, that sounds like kind of a passive way to do it. I wonder if that works. So I wanted to ask what you think about that. Is it a realistic expectation to attract attention from abroad, or is it an unrealistic expectation? I figure that there's going to have to be many things done after you write that LinkedIn post. What's your thought on that?
I guess there's two different ones. One, LinkedIn is part of a digital marketing strategy. It's a very powerful tool. In fact, in about 2 hours, we're having our own CMO doing a masterclass on LinkedIn to our own sales team.
Okay.
How can we
Sure.
do better leveraging LinkedIn, right? Because it's a very powerful tool that shouldn't be abused.
Okay.
So so you should be social on LinkedIn, sharing interesting content, connecting with your ecosystem, commenting on companies, promoting your own clients, promoting your own ecosystem. So it's just not about me. It's not about blowing your own horn. It's really
Sure.
about sharing and being exciting out there. And that's
Sure.
part of a digital marketing strategy. That's part of building your brand. And it's by nature, it's international. But that
Okay.
should also go along with building your own database, doing email marketing, doing content, doing newsletters on your website, doing case studies and references and blogs, ebooks like you read from us, and probably also building that target companies that you want to be targeting, and then tying that into an outbound strategy of calling, specifically emailing. So there's digital marketing, there's outbound, building that database and targeting. And then you mentioned going to events. You can go to an event, but don't be passive. Just show up at the event and walk booth to booth. Nobody's going to want to, they want to sell. They don't want to be sold to.
Sure.
So if you're going to go to an event, do your homework, reach out, find out who's going to be there, contact them and say, listen, we'd love to meet up and talk about X. And people are open. They're happy to set up a meeting. And there's a lot of difference coming up and say, hi, Matt, thanks for, responding to my email or my LinkedIn about meeting. Is this still a good time? And at the event, and people are much easier, opener than just coming in cold and say, hey, I'm Rick and I want to offer you my sales outsourcing services. And people say, listen, here's my card, call me later. I'm busy selling. I don't want to.
Okay. Yeah. So, Alper, we're running out of time, so we probably need to wrap it up for the day. Before we go, do you have anything else that you wanted to ask Rick?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. I could stay here all day long and pepper Rick with questions, but we've got to wrap up at some point, so we should probably do it about now. So I just wanted to thank you, Rick, very much for joining us today.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Alper.
It was a great pleasure having you with us. And so, Alper, I will see you in a couple weeks then.
Yeah, see you. And Rick, thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Matt,
See you.
you mentioned how people can contact us. Our website's is the best, which is salesforceeurope.com, nothing to do with the other company.
Yeah.
And if you reach out there, it goes directly to me. So I'm happy to respond to anybody who's interested in talking.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Rick. Talk to you later.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rosanes. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.